Hey friends, welcome to Clear on Life. How do you take on a creative project that is bigger than yourself, with many responsibilities and a lot of unknowns? The project in question here is the television travel docu-series Fly Brother with Ernest White II. And my guest is, you guessed it, Ernest White II. He's the show's host and producer. The show is currently airing in the United States on public television stations and Create TV worldwide. He's also the founder of Presidio Pictures, a film and TV and digital media studio focused on LGBTQ, BIPOC, and senior elder narratives. He has appeared on the Travel Channel's Destination Showdown and Jamaica Baird. Ernest is also a prolific writer with works featured in Time Out London, USA Today, National Geographic, TravelChannel.com, and many, many more. His obsessions include South Africa, Sao Paulo, and Rita Hayworth. Enjoy.
Clear on Life. Clear on Life. Clear on Life.
The Clear on Life podcast.
The journey into finding purpose, meaning, and clarity in life.
Welcome to the Clear on Life podcast.
Ernest, welcome to Clear on Life. How's it going?
I'm good, Jazz. Thank you for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you for taking the time to do this interview with me.
Hey, anytime, my brother. I'm always available for you.
Thanks, brother. So, tell me about your project that you're working on. Sounds like a big deal.
Sure, man. One of the many projects that I'm working on, actually. Right now, it's a television travel series called Fly Brother with Ernest White II. It's a series about friendship and connection around the world. In it, I go to visit friends in different places. They bring me into their community, show me what they love about the place, and we show the audience that the whole world is our tribe. And right now, it is rolling out on public television stations around the country, and we will also be premiering on Create TV, the cable network, on August 10th. And so you can find out more by checking your local listings or visiting our website at flybrother.net.
So it sounds like a huge project in terms of the amount of work that you would have to put into this.
It is massive, immense, vast, and profound. All of those things.
I'm very curious, in what ways is this massive? I guess like the number of people involved.
Actually, no. It's been a surprisingly small crew. It's just in the learning curve was incredibly steep. I had never done a television series before, and certainly not one as an independent producer. Mm-hmm. And so as a storyteller, that part comes naturally to me, just engaging with people and having conversation. Traveling also was something that came natural to me just because I felt compelled from an early age to be out in the world, to connect with people across cultures and just to learn. So that was the easy part. The challenges came in learning how to be fully possessed of myself while on camera, to just the ins and outs of visual storytelling coming from a writer's perspective, and then also learning the business of television and the business of public television. Sometimes being an artist, I don't know if you've ever seen the Lego movie, where the Unikitty is like on the table going business, numbers. Like that's my favorite part of that movie because like I get it. Like that whole section of just it being beyond my understanding until it wasn't beyond my understanding.
So there were quite a few things that were new for you in this process.
Yes, more things that were new for me than were old.
I see.
Yes.
Okay. Well, that sounds sort of intimidating.
It's ridiculously intimidating. I was going to say it's hella intimidating, but I'm not from the San Francisco Bay Area originally, so I don't want to claim ownership to that, but it just felt appropriate in the moment. It's hella intimidating, man. There's just so much you don't know. There's so much out there kind of to learn, and you're constantly learning.
What's striking to me is that you're talking about there's so much unknown, stepping into the unknown and learning all these new things and just figuring your way around through this. A lot of people would be intimidated, but you seem like you're glowing out there and smiling about it right now. So What's the deal?
Well, it's more just because like we're vibing, and I'm just like, yeah, man, we're doing the thing.
Yeah.
But I would say part of it is the fact that, you know, honestly, it's a calling. You know, it's something that it's a project, it's a mission that I was chosen for by a higher power, the universe, spirit, source, whatever you want to call it. I think it's important that that is known. You know, I didn't set out to create some travel series for television.
So when you say it's a calling, is it also then, it is such a calling, did it become a responsibility in some ways?
I would say it's always been that, and it's always
Okay.
the level of responsibility has always existed. For me, I've also been lucky or blessed enough to recognize that responsibility because I grew up in a family that owned their responsibility to society, to the community. My parents are both teachers. They're retired now. My mom's 82 years old. 82 years young. You know, she just had her birthday last week. My father's 73. My parents were career teachers, high school level in my hometown of Jacksonville, Florida. But they also were very active in community service projects and engaging with their friends to do things to be a source of support and of development and growth for people.
It's worth discussing then how this project came to be.
Sure.
Could you give us a brief rundown on how this started? Because it seems like it was a big deal with a lot of unknowns, and if something like that just comes someone's way, they might turn it down because you know, that's not for me. That's just way too much work, or that's just.
Well, sure. I would say that it didn't all of a sudden just show up as one thing. You know, it didn't show up as you're going to do this show that will appear on public television. You know, it was incremental. You know,
Okay.
It was gradual, even though some of the gradation was quite steep. And, you know, as I was saying, like I've been kind of groomed in a way because I grew up in a community, in a family where people were already focused beyond just themselves and their own individual lives.
Would you say then, along those lines, is this a service?
100%.
Okay.
I would say not only is it a service just in terms of the story itself as a show that focuses on friendship and connection at a time when we've never needed that awareness more, and at a time that has never really, in our lifetimes anyway, shown up as proof that we're connected, that we've got community, that we are, you know, really all one, you know, kind of. Again, I know it's a bit woo-woo, but look at the fact that the pandemic is happening, showing us that we're connected from a health and wellness perspective. Look at the fact that the, you know, earth, the physical earth that we inhabit is healing in certain areas once that human activity, the buzz of it, stopped for a little while, you know, showing us that we're very much interrelated to that. Look at what's happening in the wake of the George Floyd assassination. You know, the fact that people are seeing now, you know, Breonna Taylor, all of the names are representative of the fact that our societies are in need of transformation and healing. And all of that is happening as an example of showing us that as an example of us being connected. And my show is in service to that.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And what I'm getting from that is that there's this service element.
Sure.
And it's a big deal project with a lot of unknowns. So it's a journey,
Absolutely.
you know, and it's bigger than you.
100%. You know, the show is called Fly Brother with Ernest White II. Even though it's something that I, let's say, birthed, if you will, it can be handed off to someone else who's able to step into the shoes. It can turn into something, whatever else. It can evolve, you know, into whatever it needs to evolve into. But the fact that I am not Fly Brother, you know, even though it's something that I came up with, a concept, a persona even, I think speaks to the fact that it's bigger than me, that it's about all of us.
Something being bigger than you, and then you're a part of it, of course,
Sure.
and you're a significant part of it. Does this help with the motivation for doing it? I want to get into that world of what makes you tick in this project.
Sure.
What are the things that come in the way? Let's start with this. Does this help or does this come in the way?
No, I think that recognition that it's of greater service is part of the motivation. Mm-hmm. It's part of what gets you through some of the tough spots. It's not the only thing. My own personal gain to come out of it, let's say, be that financially or professionally, that's only part of it as well. Like, those things matter because I'm in a physical body that wants to have gratification in my life. I live in a society, even you can say what you want about it being a matrix, whatever. Great. Okay. But still, I'm in it. It's a game that we're playing. So play the damn game. That's part of it as well. And I would say, one of the challenges is when you get to a place of trying to get out of the game, when you get to a place of saying, screw this, it's not what I want. Sometimes you're not allowed to quit.
Do you have those moments
of
where
course
you're
I've
like,
had those moments.
I'm done with this?
Absolutely. When the money wasn't there, for example, when you didn't feel like you were in alignment with the people that you were working with, and you just think, I could be a librarian in Santa Cruz, reading books by day and going to the beach in the afternoon kind of thing. And that's just, as much as I want to run away from the responsibility sometimes, or just the pressure of uncertainty, particularly when it comes to the finances. It's everyone who works on a large project has those moments. And yet, I'm still here, which means there is on some level that knowledge that I can't really quit.
So what is it that makes you persevere when you're faced with that uncertainty? Or any kind of uncertainty?
Well, I would say there would always be some light at the end of the tunnel, even if that light was like a speck of dust. There was always something that would propel me a little bit forward a little bit more. And it's baby steps to quantum leaps, and back to baby steps again. And but it's never all quantum leaps, and it's never all baby steps.
Right.
And so those little bits of advancement, if you will, are what keep you in the game.
When the going gets tough, you just start taking smaller steps.
Absolutely. Okay. And those are still wins. Yeah. And I think in this, it's important to acknowledge the wins, because if you don't, it's often the struggle screams louder than the win ever does. Because when you're not eating, when you don't know how your bills are going to get paid, when you don't know how to solve a problem that may show up, that is much more of a visceral kind of experience often than the win, And so that said, it's important to celebrate those wins, because when you don't, even when you're winning, you're still, all you've known up to then is the struggle. And at that point, you become embittered. And so when the wins are big and small, the small wins are just as important.
Right. And it seems like you're in your journey are aware of all these small wins.
I'm aware of some of them. There are others that I'm not aware of. And I have friends and family members who are able to call them out and call me out and say, hey, stop, take a beat. Did you see what you just did? Do you recognize the importance of, having a show that is coming out at a time when people are feeling disconnected? Do you see that you delivered something with a team that is working from home, not working in a studio, but they're able to kind of pull together and get this work done remotely? Those are things that often I kind of get lost in. Or when we deliver an episode to the network, instead of saying, whew, all right, let's celebrate the fact that episode was delivered. I'm sometimes prone to just, all right, now let's get this next one out, and barely even taking an afternoon off to kind of revel in the accomplishment.
So this is like the opposite of people who get so complacent resting on the laurels of just one small win that they just maybe go nowhere. Whereas the other extreme would be that you're just beating yourself up because no matter how great you do, it's never enough. So you're not even acknowledging any of the steps or any of the progress.
Sure. Workaholism is a thing. And it's like other isms, it's a symptom of a larger problem.
Right.
And I will say that one of the wins that I can celebrate is having phenomenal people in my life sharing the journey with me who are watching and can say, let's celebrate this, and I've helped other people celebrate their wins. It's always multi-directional. It's never that I'm so swamped in work I'm not able to be there for people, because I am able to be there for people, and I am there for people when I'm able to, and vice versa. And I just feel so grateful to have an active community of loved ones.
Let's go there. People in your lives. So it seems like it's very, very important to have a community around any project like this where they're serving a purpose.
Oh, absolutely.
And of course, you're serving them in some ways too. Otherwise, they wouldn't be there. Right?
Sure. Teamwork makes the dream work. And yes, I may be the figurehead for this particular project, but on other projects, I was the janitor. I, cleaned the toilet and everything in between. And so, there's nothing that I've really experienced in life that didn't involve connection with others. I do spend a lot of time in isolation as an artist, as a creator, and that's very necessary. But it's not for me just to then create and be here with the creation by myself. Even if you look at, like, let's say procreation, it requires two. And so the idea then is to really appreciate that community, because I don't do it for myself and I don't do it by myself.
So the theme that I'm seeing in here, and I love it, is that, there's a project that's bigger than you, way bigger than you, and you're playing a significant role in it. So you have a purpose in there. There are challenges which definitely make it not boring, and in fact give it some sort of like a meaning, like you're crossing these hurdles.
Sure.
If it was super easy, you might get bored.
100%. Oh, right. And if it were super easy, I wouldn't be called into ever larger expansion and impact and affect and effect. All of those things grow out of the hurdles that are kind of put in your path.
Speaking of super easy, are there aspects of this project that are easy, or they come to you naturally? Can you give me a couple of those?
For me, just engaging with people, the conversational aspect of what I do. Again, in the show, in each episode, I'm hanging out with my friends and we're having conversation.
Right.
That's the most natural thing in the world for me to do.
Right.
So there is that. Things have become easier now, to the point of me even enjoying them. And part of that is like being not on TV so much as being in front of the camera and kind of holding the space as I engage with people while being watched. That was something I hated before, because it makes me vulnerable. I have to be seen. Well, no one wants that, do they? And so eventually, the exercises that helped me through that included being on camera where somebody could possibly see my little, paunch, my stomach or whatever, and not be having a six pack in every episode and looking heavier in some episodes than other episodes because of whatever was happening in life at that point. And I might have been eating more than before. And so, being okay with being that person on screen, and now it is much easier, and I can actually enjoy being myself and say, there I am being myself again, for better or worse. So that's something that's become easy.
Now, there are times when someone's doing a project or working on something, and it might be a really well-intentioned effort, and they come across a hurdle like what you had, very self-conscious on what's happening on the screen, especially when seeing it. And somehow you just went through with it rather than just stop there and say, okay, that's the reason. That's why I don't do this.
Oh, so there were moments that I said that. And my cameraman, for example, was like, oh, hell no, you're doing this, and would not allow me to quit. or people who invested in me would not allow me to quit, or my parents would not allow me to quit. So there are times when people have been placed specifically in the journey to say the right thing, that thing that resonates, you know?
And so what's interesting is that this project then is bigger than you in a few different ways. It's bigger than you in terms of like what it's serving. There's a purpose that's bigger than you, and you're kind of like, but then also in the day-to-day, it's bigger than you, because if it was just you in your room doing this all by yourself, might be a different outcome than when you have this cameraman or your parents or your friends who speak up at the right time, so you don't, let's say, quit or take the left turn when you wanted to take the right turn.
Correct.
You know, so it's bigger than you in that it's a team of people, even if they're not an official team.
Correct. 100%. Every single person in my interact. There have been people that I have interacted with, like a homeless man sitting on a bus stop who has said the exact thing I needed to hear in that moment. Mm-hmm. Or who has allowed me to say the exact thing that we both needed to hear in that moment.
Let me ask you this about that. Many people, if a homeless man said something to them, would just brush it off or just try to run away from it. What was it that made you stop and say, okay, this is exactly the thing I needed to hear? Or was that in retrospect?
No, I mean, I feel like when it's the right thing, you know it right away, number one. And number two, I mean, it's just because it's a homeless man, it's a man. It's a human being. Mm-hmm. So to even look, I grew up in American society too. I've got my I don't know what you would I don't know what you would want to call it, but I have my attitudes and biases like every other human being. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I've always recognized like a person is a person is a person. So to like, oh, he's homeless, he doesn't know what he's talking about. I mean,
yeah, and that kind of bias or that kind of prejudice will just stop you from experiencing whatever that reality has to give you.
Absolutely.
Or that person.
Sure.
Right?
And it doesn't mean that I want to necessarily inhale that person's body odor. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. I understand people might not wanting to necessarily linger in the space, but at the same time, who knows how that person ended up in that situation? None of us are beyond reproach. None of us have it so figured out that we can't necessarily end up in a situation that we may find despicable or repugnant.
Right.
You know?
So, and that this could apply to anyone or anything. If a person, regardless of, you know, how we perceive them, they are in their society or whatever their history is, gives you a sign in some ways that then connects you further into your path, then, you know, it could be the next person and the next person or the next thing.
Exactly.
Or the next animal.
It's all of it. And there have been actual written signs, you know, and you say, oh, that's a sign. And then you see like 99-cent store. Well, that's a sign too. And the idea is for you to be aware of it, take the sign, and also have a sense of humor about it, which is not always easy to do. But there's a lesson to be learned in anything.
Sense of humor. So being aware, being open to it,
yes,
and then having
not being too serious about it.
Not being too serious.
Yeah.
Would you say you're too serious about your project, or do you take it with a grain of salt, or like is there a sense of humor?
To borrow a phrase from the indomitable Erykah Badu, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. Like, my name is Ernest. I'm very serious. Believe that if you wanna. And that's what I mean. Like, you have to, like, yes, I am serious. And yes, I can get very intense about what I'm doing. You know, I do believe in impeccability, and I believe in, if I'm putting my name on something, it should be the best that it can be. And at the same time, I live in the world where you don't always get to have things your way, and that sometimes you have to accept that it is the best possible way it can be given all of the circumstances that are involved surrounding it, and that it's still perfect in that imperfection, you know. And that's something, not only that it has taken me years to kind of understand, but also years to really embody, to really lean into. And it requires constant practice.
Yeah, I love the way you can hold seriousness and humor at the same time. I mean, that's the magic right there.
Thank you, man. Thank you. And it is recognizing that both are true. You know, when things started, everyone was already just worn out. Their nerves were frayed during the pandemic. And then to have like the George Floyd situation show up, which again is really not an old situation. It's something that's been in existence for 400 years, like that kind of racial inequity. But what you're seeing now is it's on everybody's, you know, like mobile devices. I was going to say television, but that actually happened in the 60s. But anyway, you see it on everybody's mobile device. That's showing up. And even in that, there's room for both and. There's room for exhaustion and empowerment. So there's also room for seriousness and humor, even when it's gallows humor and dark humor. You know, you just need to know, you need to be able to thread that needle of appropriateness and recognize that you saying something may have consequences. But in the end, everything has to be possible, because otherwise, how could we get through life?
And there's also this thing of, if you worry too much about consequences, you might actually just not be fully expressive.
If you worry about anything too much, you won't be fully expressive.
But it has its place.
Absolutely. That's the thing. Like consequences, accountability, responsibility.
Right.
You know, those things are not punitive. They don't have to be. They allow us to be in the world together. Because we do show up with so many different experiences, so many different traumas, so many different happinesses, you know? And in order to navigate that, certain structure is required. And that's what I understand consequences and awareness and political correctness and all of these other things that people kind of push back against. It's like political correctness is asking you to be polite to people, not just don't be an asshole to somebody.
Right.
Really, it's that simple.
And there's a skill of balancing your reality of how you express yourself, and
100%.
at the same time be polite and nice to others if you can, you know, and just own it.
Yeah. And yeah, again, it goes back to the idea of you can have everything.
There's no such thing as black and white, and we're you know, you got to find your balance.
Correct.
Yeah.
I would say this, man. The only thing black and white that I enjoy is a good old school Hollywood movie, like All About Eve. Check it out if you haven't. Phenomenal black and white experience. But in life, I want full Technicolor. You know, like it's not even that I want it. It's I need it. We need it. Humans need it. And I think when you talk about that balance, I mean, there's consequences to all of it. There's consequences to, and those consequences really are just experience on one level or another, you know, and yes, you can put your value system on top of it. I'm a human being. I have a value system as well. You know, yes, you can go dark with it when you talk about consequences to fully expressed murder, for example. You know, is that full expression of self?
Right.
Well, yeah, it is, and there's consequences to that. You know, and so I suppose it's not just in talking about the black and white. Like, it's not a pat answer. It's just a recognition that there are consequences to everything, and I'm learning how to balance out the consequences of my actions and my intentions.
Tying that back to your project,
Sure.
It makes a lot of sense that on one hand, you're being serious about it, but then you also have this sense of humor, and there's no black and white there. There's a lot going on, and there's
Sure.
It's a lot of swirls of colors.
Yes.
Yeah.
I started off seriously. I started off and that.
You mean started off your project?
I started off the project because at that time I took life very seriously. Like my life was straight up drama. And when I say drama, I don't mean like there was a lot of drama in my life. I'm saying like if you had to give it a genre, it was not a comedy drama. It was not a thriller. It was drama. It was humorless. It was a series of actions that were happening that like
You were supposed to do?
That you were supposed to do, and oftentimes there was grief. And yes, there was an occasional bit of humor, but it needed to be balanced out. And I think that I've kind of been lucky and successful in finding some of that balance in a way that because I was able to let go a little bit of the drama, I could find the humor in it.
So let's talk about that. Finding humor in quote unquote serious tasks.
Sure.
Serious projects. Obviously, someone's working on a project of their life. As of right now, let's say, it might be hard for them to be humorous about it. They might like automatically tend to be a little too serious unless their personality is such that they can just be light about it.
Yes.
Now, do you know of any like clear and explicit ways of bringing humor into whatever you're doing that you consider serious?
Do I know any clear and explicit ways of bringing humor into something serious?
Figured out. I'll ask, and if you don't, that's totally cool.
No, I mean
maybe you can share.
It's hard just because sometimes it's innate, right? Or it's like I'll say this: a lot of the humor that I'm able to embody has come from like parents who would make jokes and be sarcastic often. It's skills that you develop over the years and you hone and you fine tune. But I also think it's when you reach a point of recognizing that it ain't that serious, that you could lose it all, that you are not a failure even if something else fails, that you are always loved, I think all of those things, that understanding that you are, a fully complete being, that nothing is wrong on some level, you can have fun with it.
So, I mean, in some ways, if you do anything in order to prove your worth,
you run the risk of failing.
Yeah.
Right?
And so then you will be very, very serious.
100%. And I think that's a good perspective because when I think about it, as you've said it, a lot of that was proving to myself and to the world that I was worth something.
So this is when you started, that was like, okay, I want to show the world how I'm capable of doing X, Y, and Z. I'm going to show it. So you can't help but be serious.
Of course. And it's also subconscious. You're not thinking I'm doing this, even though you're doing it the whole time.
Right. And so when was it that it became this, oh, you know what? I can relax a little. I can bring some humor in it. Or did you just notice that happened over time naturally?
It definitely was incremental. It was a definite. There was no like tipping point that was observable to me, even though to my crew, for example, my cameraman, like he's like, "Oh my God, man! Like now we're having fun. Like this is fun. Those first episodes were not fun, dude." Like and that's a good.
Did they tell you what was different?
Yeah, he was just like, you're more engaging. You're turning, and part of it, I mean, it's really the whole thing at the same time. As I'm working on my own like self-worth issues and self-love and all that kind of stuff, I'm also at the same time mastering my presence on camera, and then being able to let whatever's happening behind the camera or behind me not affect me as I'm doing the work and engaging with the person that I'm engaging with, and I'm becoming more present, and I'm doing all of so it's really all of it happening at the same time, and it's different kinds of incremental advances. You know what I mean? And so then looking back, you're able to see like, oh, I really am kind of more engaging on camera, making jokes more, being fully self-expressed. But it's built on that foundation of knowing there's no screwing up.
Yeah.
There may be things that don't happen in the way that I want them to happen. And again, this is an awareness that I have now. This was not an awareness that I had during the process.
And it's very valuable for me, and I'm guessing for the audience, to just see that contrast,
Sure.
from before and after, because I can then go in and evaluate my reality and say, like, okay, I'm doing this project. Let's say I'm doing this podcast.
Yes.
Am I doing this to prove to the world that I'm capable of something? Or is there another reason? Is there a different reason? Or is there a mix of both?
I'm so happy you said that.
And I would say there's
Absolutely.
probably a mix of both. I'll be the first to admit. Yeah, I mean, as you noticed earlier, like I'm being a perfectionist about this. There's probably some of that reasoning behind is like, okay, better be good. There's that.
But the consequence of that is that you've got a good show. It's okay. So part of the fact that I'm able to have a show filmed in so many different places is because I traveled a lot. Part of the reason I traveled a lot was because I was looking for myself, because I had definite challenges with self-love and self-worth. And so in doing so, I was able to create something beautiful. And it does require all of that. Like, we're not given those insecurities for nothing either.
Right.
We're
There's
not
a purpose for those.
100%.
Yeah.
And so it allows us to have the drive when it may be absent because of in the face of the carrot. The carrot may not be the thing that motivates us. It might be the fire on our tail or whatever it is.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So in other words, if you're working on something and you consider it important and you're taking very seriously, you might want to lighten up. But if you're taking very seriously, don't beat yourself over that fact either.
You definitely have to be.
There needs to be open
to evolving
and self-compassion.
Yes, self-compassion, because you then will be serious about not being serious or being too serious. You know what I mean? Especially if you're that kind of person that takes everything seriously. I'm going to be serious about being more humorous.
Yeah,
right. And that's really the path to self-flagellation.
Yeah.
And the other thing I wanted to say though is recognize that it is always continuous. Just because I'm speaking from a place of power right now in this moment doesn't mean that another challenging moment won't. It most certainly will come my way, and I'll have to regroup and go back into and use the tools that I've got and add additional tools,
Ernest, thank you. So I want to summarize the things that we covered just
Sure.
real quick. Working on something, undertaking something that is bigger than you. We talked about that. How you're not alone in doing something that really helps with actually giving that project a sense of, okay, it's not just me. That's a good thing.
Sure.
We also talked about how you obviously don't want to take something too seriously. It has its purpose, but you want to find the balance between taking something seriously and having a sense of humor and actually playing with it, having a sense of play in it.
Sure.
We talked about that. We also talked about when you run into obstacles, then that's where your community, because it's bigger than you, comes to help out.
Absolutely.
Taking small steps, and also recognizing the wins.
Yes.
It's very important, right? Any parting words before we call this one off?
Man, I was going to say, just as you were recapping that, and I appreciate that recap, man, you were super organized in a way that I find encouraging, and I look forward to one day having an nth of your organizational ability.
You can have all.
But I would say that flexibility, I didn't mention before, but flexibility, which comes out of having things not go right, having those challenges. When you start to see yourself like Elastigirl, you know what I mean? Able to just be super flexible. Then that adds to your play. That adds to that a bit, because you can kind of start doing cool things with that flexibility. And it helps to also keep you from being so serious about whatever you're doing. That said, again, folks can find out more about the show Fly Brother with Ernest White II. Right now, again, it is on public television stations around the country. We will be debuting on Create TV, which is PBS's cable network, on April 10th. And check your local listings, or you can follow us at flybrother.net for more information, on Instagram at FlyBrother, Twitter at FlyBrother, and the Facebook page, I believe, is Fly Brother Fly.
You got the names right and you reserved them. That's smart.
Yes.
Ernest, this was a pleasure. Thank you, brother, for joining me on this little journey.
Thank you so much, man. It is always an honor and a pleasure to spend some time with you, bro.
All right. Thank you so much for listening, all. Goodbye.